Of course, no issue of royalties is complete without considering the definition and the treatment of the recoupable expenses. Before we define the expenses deemed as recoupable by this agreement, let us first define the portion of the income from which those expenses will be recouped. Unlike in the standard recording agreement, where the recoupables are habitually collected from the artist's royalties, in this agreement, all the recoupables are collected from the company's royalties, at the unrecouped level, of course, providing the artist with income from the first sale. For instance, if the initial net sales figure is, let's say, $10,000 and the recoupable expenses are $20,000, the artist will still get $3,000 in royalties, 30% of the net sales at the unrecouped level, regardless of the recoupable expenses exceeding the net income. In the standard agreement, as you remember, the artist would not receive royalties until the company is fully recouped, and even then from the artist's royalties only, not its own. So what constitutes a recoupable expense in this recording agreement? Well, because of the level of the artist's royalties being much higher than in the standard agreement, and because of the nature of the general recoupment principles in this agreement, meaning artist royalties flowing from the sales won, right? Recoupable expenses are by financial necessity defined as all expenses incurred in direct efforts toward production, advancement, and sales of the album. Recording, promotion, marketing, distribution, and so on. Yes, that would include all the expenses for video production, ad campaigns, promotional material, public relations, and so on. Understandably, this is an issue where one may be taken aback by such a broad stroke, knowing that in the standard recording agreement, some of those expenses, in full and/or various portion thereof, would be considered unrecoupable cost and would be negotiated as the dollar amount to be spent by the company for those purposes. Now, one should remember, however, that according to those same standard practices, the artist is entitled to only a fraction of the royalties outlined in this new agreement, then the standard recoupment principles and base are much more detrimental to the artist's potential income, giving the company greater financial award and freedom. See, every equitable agreement is based on even-handed give and take, and treating all album production, advancement, and sales expenses as recoupable in this new agreement is not only reasonable, considering the full picture, but also necessary if the company is to continue doing business. Before we move on, a special note is needed here if the company runs its own recording production facility and does not have to necessarily expand additional funds for recording services, as it already has the space, the equipment, and the production personnel. In that case, a recoupable production expense should still occur, but at lower level than if the recording services were contracted from elsewhere. Why the recoupable expense here at all? Well, because the equipment, the space, and the effort that goes into the recording production of an album are valuable, and the company should be appropriately compensated for initially investing in it and providing it. Such recoupable expense figure should be negotiated and set according to the complexities, the scope, and the need of the project, and stated in the contract itself as fixed recoupable amount. Let us now look briefly at the controlled composition clause and different approaches to the issue of the mechanical license fees. First of all, there is no reasonably justifiable excuse for standard limitations pertaining to the maximum amount of the mechanical fees payable by the company if the recording artist is also a composer. The payment methodology might be modified, but the amount should remain full and complete statutory sum for all the artist's compositions on the album, meaning no controlled composition clause at all. If that is the case then, and if the treatment of the mechanical fees is to reflect the equitable nature of the new agreement, the artist should strongly consider substituting the right to upfront mechanical fees payment for agreement to collect the amount equivalent to those fees as a separate payment from the company's royalties, thus reducing the amount of the initial company's investment and risk. If the album sells, and as long as it is selling, the artist will receive the amount equal to all the mechanical license fees due, but as it sells, not before it sells. On the other hand, the company needs to be sensitive to the fact that this arrangement has a potential of putting the artist in an unfavorable position with his prospective publisher. As an alternative, if the artist's position with the publisher needs to be strengthened, and if the company is financially able, of course, the artist's mechanical license fees might be paid up front and simply be treated as regular recoupable expenses. Of course, if the compositions on the album are written by the composers other than the contracted artist, the mechanical license fees should be paid by the company at the rate negotiated with the publisher of those compositions and should be deemed as a recoupable expense. And what about all those royalty deductions sprinkled so generously throughout traditional recording agreements? None. No packaging, no breakage, no all-in, no free goods, no new technologies, no royalty deductions at all. None. Just like the previous issue of the definition of recoupable expenses might have initially taken one partly back until we considered the full picture, this kind of broad stroke treatment of the standard deductions might take back another party. But, to some of the major and large indie labels, immortals, who still worship at the altar of the standard recording agreement, it may even sound sacrilegious and heretical, but to us simple humans in the recording business, those standard deductions are not only disingenuous and unjustifiable, but plain embarrassing and reprehensible. There are only three reasonable conclusions and possibilities regarding these so-called standard deductions. One, if the company has a need to invent deductions and deprive its artists of their hard-earned royalties in order to increase its own income so the company can survive, then the company needs to seriously rethink its business model, starting with its obviously critically flawed operating budget. Or two, if on the other hand, these deductions are in the company's recording contract because the company simply modeled it on our industry's long-standing contractual standards and practices, then it just needs to delete them all, modify its financial forecasts, budgets, and expectations accordingly, and move on in a new, positive, smart business direction. And three, if neither of the above applies to the company, and yet the contract that the company uses contains those deductions, then the words like deceit, greed, and plain wrong on so many levels come to mind, and that company's business will not last long in today's world. The new world and the new business environment of today requires of us to rethink and alter traditional recording agreement standards in order to keep our artists satisfied and productive, our product fairly priced, our customers happy, our business healthy, and our companies profitable. For if we don't do so, if we don't offer a meaningful alternative, our new world with all its new technological, networking, and communication wonders already offers all kinds of alternatives to our artists and our customers, and we can easily and quickly be dropped from the whole equation. Common sense, good business principles, and common decency demand that our new standards, unlike the traditional ones, be based on transparency, equitability, moderation, and long-term strategic business principles. All the new contractual possibilities we described above certainly meet those criteria and should serve well the labels of all sizes and of all organizational forms, at least as initial contractual points, a penciled blueprint which can be easily modified according to particular circumstances while retaining its original character and spirit. After that, all that's needed is to add a bit of courage, vision, and heart, and the music will surely play on.